Hi, everyone. Welcome to Soulprint. Thank you so very, very much for being here. To my new subscribers, welcome. To my established ones, of course, I adore you. Alrighty. So there's kind of like a lot of crazy going on. Just saying. Um, what we're dealing with here is the world's just sort of imploding. Okay. So 45 has taken to attacking um, Leonard Leo. Okay, so for those of you who maybe know the name but not quite connecting it, he is like part of the Federalist Society. Um, Trump is upset because the ruling that came out of that very specific court that deals with tariffs and I guess intercountry negotiations said that the tariffs that he was unilaterally applying all over the place were illegal. And Trump wants to know what kind of a sleaze bag Leo is and what kind of judges he put on this court um, because, you know, they didn't agree with what he was doing. Okay. Then you have Elon Musk calling the new big, beautiful bill a abomination. I think it was a disgusting abomination, I think was the phrase. Because it's going to add, $3.2 trillion to the debt. Um, and it's going to be interesting to see. Michael Cohen, I saw a little blurb of something that he did, and he was saying, you wait and see. Trump's next going to figure out how to go after Musk's money, right? And you know what? It makes perfect sense. I absolutely agree. I mean, he does the whole vengeance thing, right? And so Musk said something that he didn't like, and now he's going to figure out a way to hurt him. Now, it's not that I don't think any of us are feeling particularly sympathetic to Musk because he's created his own disaster in the United States. Not to mention what he's done to Tesla. So, where are we at? We have somebody who is spiraling isn't the right word because spiraling is actually too slow a motion for what he is doing. He is just absolutely detonating um, the United States. And what's worse is he actually thinks he's doing the right thing. So he just recently announced that he was going to add an additional 25% onto the tariffs for aluminum and steel. Well, apparently Coca-Cola has a really big problem with that because it's going to increase the price of, their cans of pop by, I think it's 12 to 15%. Okay, that's not good. Nope, that's not good. Now, apparently, they have other manufacturing plants all over the world. But of course, if they utilize any of those to create the product, and apparently the United States is still the biggest consumer of Coca Cola. If they bring it in from other countries, well, I guess now it's going to be tariffed. So, you're getting tariffed by using the product in the country, then you're getting tariffed by trying to bring it in to match demand. So I want to take sort of a circular look, if you will, of the energy that is reacting and that is responding to this out of control infant who is sitting in the White House having a perpetual temper tantrum. By the way, for anybody who missed it, Mark Carney, who is the Prime Minister of Canada, made a little speech just the other day, and basically very politely said the relationship as we have known it, and in fact, the relationship as the world has known with the United States is now over. It's done. Not where we can work at it, we can try to fix it, but it's done. And what Canada says, you're going to hear the exact same thing coming from Australia and the EU and China. And so his idea that if you tariff the crap out of product coming in, then people will be forced to buy American made. Okay, well, that kind of makes sense, except that by doing what he's doing, he is messing up the stock market. There isn't going to be enough product, enough. There isn't going to be with what to manufacture fast enough. Manufacturing facilities aren't going to go up fast enough. So it's going to create a downturn. Well, what happens then? Well, then people get laid off, and now your unemployment goes up. It's like he has tunnel vision, and Pedro Navarro's and that other Yahoo who's advising him about economics. They have such a narrow tunnel vision that they're not looking at the ripples. Apparently, he's canceling the chip program. This created like 115,000 really good, well paying jobs. It was sort of one of the signature pieces of the Biden administration. Well, Trump is canceling it because, well, it was just done by Biden, and so he has to get rid of it. So he's now going to eliminate 115,000 well paying jobs. Well, where do those people go? Right? So I want to take a look, as I said, at the energy around him because he is deteriorating. It appears so rapidly that one wonders how the people around him are actually coping with this and how it is being received, beyond the Republican Party in Washington. So let's see if we can get some answers here, shall we? All right, let's look at the US debt. Because the very countries that 45 has done an amazing job antagonizing, by and large, hold a lot of the debt. So, it's kind of like blowing up your banker, right? I mean, it just doesn't make sense. This is not who you're supposed to be upsetting when you are putting your country in a position where its deficit is going to increase, not in the billions, but in the trillions. And I think Trump actually believes that you just um, tell them to just make more money, just print more money, and then you'll have it. Well, it doesn't work that way. Um, so what's going on there? How are these countries going to respond? As we know, there was already a slow but consistent sell-off of bond, which is um, the mechanism by which countries hold the debt, and they've been selling it off. And so this increases the pressure to have to pay that debt. And there isn't the money to pay that debt because, of course, he's, doing tax breaks to the wealthy. What's going on? So this is going to continue. He's going to continue to get some real pushback with regards to his big, beautiful bill. And it's going to come not only from, um, corporations, if you will, but it's going to come from Republican policymakers because they have an awareness of what it is going to do to their constituents. And so the amount of deficit that is attached to this bill is going to become a real sticking point. You have, the choir boy, head of the Republican House, just spewing garbage and lies one after the other, getting caught up, getting tangled in there. He doesn't care. One of the worst things that has happened as a result of Trumpism is that nobody has any shame anymore, right? Nobody can be embarrassed or shamed into better behavior. And so they don't care if they're caught lying. They don't care because in that moment, that's what they wanted to say, and nobody is calling them out on it, certainly not the way a Democrat would have been called out on it. Well, why is that? Well, it's because it would have been the Republicans screaming their heads off, whereas the Democrats, they're not so good at that. And so a lot of this is just sort of getting absorbed in the noise. So it appears as if the bond market is going to continue to be um, volatile. It does not feel particularly stable. The stock market is another one. We've got some real ups and downs because every time he opens his mouth, the stock market reacts. So, whatever it was, Monday night or Sunday night, and he said, okay, well, so yeah, I'm just going to increase the 25% tariffs to 50% on aluminum and steel. The stock market, like, all but crashed, right? Huge, huge downturn. The problem is, and this is what you're going to see sort of over the short term, long term, is that stock market, every time it goes down, it's never going to go up to where it was. So what happens is that it is a continual downward trend. Even though it goes up and down, the lows are lower and the highs are not as high. And so, again, this creates this instability. And the American dollar is not basically considered safe by the rest of the world. Frankly, I think it's probably not considered safe by most Americans. So, both of those areas look problematic. Um, What's the reaction to the Federalist Society? People inside listen, the Federalist Society has spent all of its time. I don't know how long it's been around, but it was its inception. It was created specifically to study the Constitution, study the laws, and figure out the gray areas, figure out the cutouts or the loopholes or how to get around things, because there was a recognition that that was the only way they were actually going to be able to change the existing structure, the existing laws, because on some fundamental level, they do understand that they are in the minority and they are not in rhythm with what the rest of the country wants. But it is like religious fanatics who believe that their religion is the only right religion. And so they believe that their way of thinking is the correct way, and all the other millions of people are just simply wrong. And so even though they're a smaller group, they are a very focused and very determined group. But now what they have is, a monster sort of running around. They have created um, somebody who is basically out of control. Yes, they got the judges they wanted on the Supreme Court. Yes, they are able to, twist things and manipulate things in a way that is beneficial for Republicans and the Republican belief structures. The problem is that, you know, people can yell and scream about the deficit, but people in red states and blue states and purple states, they all, to one degree or another, benefit from the um, government programs that are in place, that safety net. So whether it is a lunch program or whether it is Medicaid or whether it is, they all benefit from it. But, they scream about the deficit. And I'm not saying there isn't waste. That's not what I'm saying. But I'm saying if you're going to um, vote a specific way because you're convinced that the government needs to be downsized and the deficit is too big, ask yourself on a basic level how it is that governments tend to rebalance a budget. They don't go running around and eliminate excess stuff. They don't cut the salaries of people at the highest levels. What do? They cut the supports, right? They cut the services, the very services that those people need, require, and depend on. So, what's going on inside the Federalist Society, please? Yeah. Um, so this is the thing. They they really like being able to operate kind of in the shadows, right? Quietly. Because as long as they were functioning quietly, they were getting done what they wanted to get done. They were figuring out the strategies to get around stuff and shift things around. But people weren't paying any attention to them. Well, and now they are. Because now more and more people have started to understand that it was the Federalist Society and those very, very ultra conservative judges that they put forward that Trump then put into the Supreme Court and other court systems throughout the land, um, that have allowed the sort of destruction, whether it is Project 2025 and the things that they're implementing from that, whether it was the woman's right to choose, um, people are starting to who were not paying attention are starting to realize that, oh my God, this is all stemming from this organization. And so all of a sudden, this organization is not exactly operating quietly. And so because of that, they are becoming uncomfortable, and certainly calling Leonard Leo a sleazebag on True Social was probably not brilliant. It this is the thing about him. He's he he doesn't seem to have a problem antagonizing, threatening, and frankly pissing off people who are more powerful, smarter, and to some degree control him. Of course, he doesn't see it that way. So while he's busy yelling and screaming and mouthing off, um, he's basically in there against a far bigger and more forceful opposition. And the strain, if you will, of that is becoming more and more apparent in his own physicality, whether his inability to complete a sentence, go off on crazy tangents that don't make any sense. I think I may have mentioned this in my last video. Apparently, as far as he's concerned, Canada is seriously considering becoming the 51st state of the United States. And then we have Mark Carney saying our relationship is done. So, yeah. But there is a ongoing sort of deterioration with him. And that I think is going to become more and more noticeable. And we are looking at not only a mental deterioration, cognitive deterioration, but we are looking at physical deterioration also. But what concerns me, I have to say, is this sort of this anger and this rage that he is just so good at manifesting out there in the masses. I have to say, and I need to be very careful how I say this, but I have to say it feels like concern for his safety is increasing because of the volatility of the emotions out there. So that's a concern. All right. Where do we go from here? Even though it is exhausting, it is important to remember that your activism, your not letting things just slide by, the phone calls that you're making to your senators, the messages you're sending, the protests that you are taking part in, it's all starting to have an impact and an effect. And interestingly, one of the ways that you can see how this is really unnerving people is that they're starting to say the quiet part out loud, right? And they're starting to say things that are so bad. I swear. Bad, okay? You got Joni Ernst saying, well, we're all going to die anyways. Like, so what's happening is they are feeling the pressure, and because they're feeling the pressure, their filters aren't working very effectively. And as that happens, well, what happens? There is a response to that, and the response is anger and indignation. And so they're becoming more and more defensive. And in doing so, they're starting now to realize that he may be doing this stuff, but by being quiet, by supporting him, by voting for what he wants, they're aiding and abetting, and they are going to feel their constituents' wrath. Particularly the House, because those people are all due for reelection in 2 years or a year and a half, I guess. So you're going to see them starting to sort of lose their footing because they're no longer feeling as if they are particularly safe. And they're also starting to recognize that he will not protect them. So, on the one hand, while they're scared of getting primaried or having all of a sudden a strong Democratic candidate in an area where that typically didn't happen, um, they're also recognizing that he's not going to come to their rescue. In fact, his attention to them in any way actually becomes a negative, right, for them. So it is important that there is an understanding or an awareness of the energies that are foot from the Trump administration, from other power brokers. As far as other leaders in other countries, by and large, they're just laughing at him. They truly are. Um, they see that he is ineffective. They see that he is so easily manipulated, um, and they can take nothing he says seriously because tomorrow or in 10 minutes he's going to flip flop and change his mind or back down. Hence the name, the Taco President, right? So he's not getting any real respect from outside of the borders. His respect inside the borders is diminishing because some of the bigger, corporations are starting to push back against certainly the tariffs because it's going to be impacting them and their um, ability to make their product, get it out there, sell their product, make the money, etc. Just as an interesting aside, apparently one of the trends that people have noticed here in Canada is that people are choosing to not consume Coke products. There has been an increase in Canada Dry, which is sort of a ginger ale, and a decrease in the overall sales and consumption of Coca-Cola. Because why? Well, because it's American. Um, so companies are already being significantly impacted. Apparently, Canadian travel to the United States is now down 40% year over year. This is not good. I mean, that has such a massive negative impact for people in the airline industries, train, bus, that kind of stuff. Hotels, restaurants, tourist attractions, all of those places are getting hit and they're getting hit hard. And the problem is it's not just Canada. It's other countries that are also saying, no, no, we're not supporting the country. So what you do at home, that activism, that staying involved, is really, really important because the change is not going to come from the Oval. The change has to come from your government reps, frankly, on all levels, um, getting to the point where they realize they can no longer just quietly support him or not quietly support him because it's going to negatively impact where they're at now. Having said all of that, it's very, very important to always remember that we are currently going through a vibrational shift. The vibrations are rising. When that happens, structures that are older and established and no longer effectively working must be torn down. They must adapt. There has to be a correction so that they reflect the current energy as it's continuing to rise. And in some crazy way, the fact that things are becoming, and it's not only the United States, you've got these sort of authoritarian governments in other places. But the fact that in some ways, there is this real push against people and their personal freedoms. Ironically, that is actually causing the vibrational shift to strengthen and speed up. And I wish somebody could explain that to me, guys. But because there's almost a visceral reaction to what is going on. Light workers, um, people who are just spiritually aware, people who have a moral compass, for God's sakes, are pushing back. And in doing so, by choosing the right, by choosing the light, they are independently and individually raising their vibration. In doing so, that higher vibration gains strength and the lower vibration continues to be diminished, because even people who um were sort of, at a lower vibration, as they are feeling the impact, even they are starting to sort of clear their eyes and move towards a different kind of mindset. Not all of them. It'll never be all of them. But certainly there is definitely a upward shift. So even though right now things are kind of crazy and they're kind of scary, trust that the work you do in terms of positive energy, happy, up, powerful emotions, again, your resistance or your activism, um, all of those things have an impact, and a really powerful and profound impact. And so keep that as your center. Stay centered, stay in that space where you are far more optimistic than fearful and pessimistic, because it takes so many more positive thoughts to cancel a negative one, that you really, really want to be careful about encouraging or wallowing in those sort of lower vibrational thoughts, because it takes a lot of work to correct them and cancel them. That is why there are so many light workers running around the planet right now. That is why there are so many 20 and 30 and 40-year-olds who have come into this planet already revving at that higher vibration, because that was the kind of energy saturation that was going to be needed in order to move this planet up, because that's simply where we are in terms of our evolution on this planet. We've already blown it up a whole bunch of times. We've already destroyed civilizations. So this time we got all of this help. So not only are there people on the planet who carry that higher vibration naturally, there are light workers, there is archangels, there is alien energy, there is everything and anything out there helping us to continue this upward movement. That being the case, that puts the onus on each and every one of us to do our part. And I don't have to worry about any one of you, because I know that each and every one of you is doing what you can and is actively looking for what else you can do and how else you can do your part. All right. I hope this has been helpful. It's important that even though I want you to stay in a very positive place, it's important to not completely disregard what is going on a day by day basis within governments, um, because what is that expression? For evil to happen, I'm butchering this. I'm sure somebody will correct me. But for evil to happen, all it takes is good men to do nothing. So we're not going to not do nothing, right? We're going to do what needs to be done because, frankly, that's why we're all here. All right. Questions in the comment section. I will see you on Pendulum Friday. Thank you very, very much for being here. Until next time, take care and be well. Bye for now.